Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV and welcome to this, the second part of my Jacob's Ladder watch party. This is the review. Yes, I've watched the film again, even though I'm very familiar with it and I've watched it many times. I've given it another watch, as I always do in these reviews, no matter how familiar I am with the film. And I've got a review lined up for you now. So I'm hoping by the time you've got this far, I'm hoping in the watch party tradition, you yourself have also watched Jacob's Ladder. If you haven't, please stop playing this video and go and watch it now. And certainly before you get to the live stream, which is the third part. This is the second part. So it's a watch party trilogy. Yeah, this is a film, as I explained in the intro. It's by Adrian Lyne, made in 1990. And yeah, it was good to watch it again. It's good to be reunited with this old film I'm very fond of. I've been watching for many years. This is a very unusual kind of film. It is, on one level, it is a horror movie. It's very much a psychological, almost Lovecraftian horror movie, which is very psychological in nature in terms of its sort of like, oh, 1 second, in terms of its you know, way it's very sort of like, it's very atmospheric rather than graphic. Well, there is sort of like graphic kind of body horror in it as well, including the monsters and some of the scenes. But when the monsters appear, you don't see the whole monster. You see little, very short, sub-second shots of little parts of each beast. I'll call them beasts. There are many different kinds of creature in this. You never see an entire creature. You see just parts of it. It's very effective actually. It's very interesting the way that. Sometimes the less explicit a horror movie is, the more frightening it is. It's a weird thing. Now, this is a horror movie that has a distinct spiritual message, and I think that ties in with the history of the writer in particular, Bruce Joel Rubin, who has penned other scripts for other films of that nature, such as Ghost. I mentioned before Ghost. He also wrote the script to that, which again is this kind of it has the theme of spiritual nature, spiritualism, life after death, that kind of thing. And it's a bit hard to work out exactly what's going on through this film, and there's a lot of confusion before the end actually about what's real, what's not, what's memory, what's actually lived experience, things like that. And to be honest, I mean, it's not really explained completely by the end. As I said this in the introduction, there are essentially two major plots within this film, two major plot structures within this film that are running concurrently side by side, but they don't really intersect in any way. Normally within a story these two things would intersect at some point, usually before the end, or some time before the end, so you would realise there was a connection between the two, in which case the entire story would be concluded in a singular nature. That's the normal way to write a story. When that doesn't happen, it feels somehow truncated. Indeed, this is. What solves that truncation, ironically, was in the original cut. Was in the original sort of rough cut for the film, because when the film was shot, there was a number of scenes. There was quite a lot deleted from this. It's actually 1 hour 53 minutes. It's an average length Hollywood sort of feature film, but there's about 20 minutes extra, which. One scene in particular, which is 13 minutes long, is absolutely crucial, and I did watch that. I watched that deleted scene. You can get it on YouTube, actually, the deleted scenes, and it's worth watching it because it just explains everything. It ties these two separate plot lines together, and really, if they'd added it to the film, it would have probably put the film over 2 hours, but it would have been worth it, I think, because it would simply means the story could have been completed properly, And I expect the filmmakers weren't too happy about the scene being left out. And I will describe the deleted scene as well in this review. And I recommend you go to YouTube, wherever you find the actual eventual feature cut of Jacob's Ladder. Also go to YouTube and look for the deleted scene. The deleted scene fits in just before the final segment, before the final scene of the film, when he goes. Well, I'll explain what happens. The first you see of Jacob is it's in Vietnam. The date is very specific, the 6th of October 1971. I don't know why they've chosen such a specific date, but this is this was in the closing stages of the Vietnam War, when it was very obvious that America and their ally in the Republic of Vietnam, that is what was called South Vietnam, were losing. They were definitely going to lose, and really they were fighting a rearguard action by then. Morale on the home front was very bad. There were lots of protests against the war, that kind of thing, and most people just wanted it over with, and the government, which was just caught in the trap because they just felt they couldn't just give up with a saving face. You know, they needed to either win or find some way of getting out of it while saving face. They don't care how many people die as a result, but that's what politicians are like. So Jacob is sitting there with his fellow soldiers. They're just off duty and they're hanging around in some village. Jacob, all the characters incidentally except one have biblical names. It's very interesting. And it's all peaceful. You actually hear the score is beautiful. Actually, it's done by Maurice Jarre, and it's like a piano solo. And it's a beautiful. The majority of the score is actually like a piano solo. It's very well done. And they're smoking marijuana, and of course this is strictly forbidden in the army. Yet, and in peacetime, obviously, a soldier caught smoking marijuana will probably do time in the pen and then get kicked out. But in wartime, of course, all the regulations go out the window, and they realised that I think some soldiers were actually allowed, and some commanders allowed their troops to smoke weed because it gave them enhanced. Having had experience with this twice myself, it gives you a very, very enhanced sense of perception. Your sounds, visual perception, visual intelligence, sound perception is much higher, which of course a soldier needs. It makes it safer and more. It makes a soldier safer and more effective. And then suddenly there's a fight breaks out. They're attacked, and they have to leap into action and repel this attack. And there's a lot of wheeling. The camera's wheeling around all over the place. It looks, and there's short clips, and it's very, very. You see soldiers badly injured, and it sort of tries to capture the confusion and fear of the battle. You hear explosions, you hear gunfire, that kind of thing. But the men in Jacob's unit start acting strangely. It's all a bit It's all very confusing. They start. They suddenly come down with convulsions, or they just sit. They sit in. One of them sits in a completely catatonic state like that, just staring into space. I might use. I got a screenshot of that. I might use it in the title or the end title of this particular video. And Jacob's trying to help them, because he's desperately trying to help them. And then next thing you know, he's on an underground train. It's like he suddenly wakes up. You see his head go like that, and you realise. Well, you think at that time, indeed he does as well, the character, that basically he's on a. He's had a dream. He's been sitting on an underground train having a dream about his past. It's the New York subway, and in the 70s it was a pretty seedy place. The train's very dirty, there's rats crawling around everywhere and things like that. There's rubbish on the floor, there are drunks asleep on the seats, things like that. And New York City in the 70s was a pretty lousy place. A lot of the crime dramas which are famous today were set in, or even made in at that time in that city. It's spooky. There's these noises which you think are like the train's brakes. It sounds, ooh, you see these really weird noises. It's almost like an animal cry. It's a strange noise. I can't reproduce it vocally, but it's like a spooky screeching noise which you think might be the train's brakes and all the train's axles or wheels. But it also sounds like the cry of a weird beast. And this is repeated over and over again. Very often, with the lights going out, the lights will flicker. They'll suddenly go out. making it even more spooky. It's a very spooky scene. This was the scene that was reproduced almost shot by shot in the remake and done really badly. Very badly indeed. And like I said, the remake is utter shite, and don't bother with it. Remakes are always bad. When you see a really shitty remake of a really good film, it's almost like an insult to the original. There's weird people. There's this old lady on the train, this woman who just stares at him. Like he asks her, he thinks he might have he might have slept and gone past this station. He asks her, "Where's my station? Have we gone past this station?" And she just looks at him like that. And there's this creature, and he notices that one of the drunks asleep on the seat just before he gets off the train at the right station, or what he thinks is the right station, has like a tail or a tentacle coming out from underneath his jacket. It's really creepy. And then he tries to. There's also there's a couple of posters on the train. There's one that says hell, and you think, what? Or like you're in, and then you realise it's a drug rehabilitation helpline. Being addicted to drugs is like being in hell, that kind of thing. And you see, it already gives you a clue about what is going on, because you see, has he really wakened from a dream at that moment, or is this a dream? You see, and what he's just experienced when in the battle in Vietnam is real. There's lots of ambiguity in much of this film. Actually, there's lots of ambiguity. There's lots of detail as well. Like, for example, he's going up in the lift to his home. He lives in a flat, or apartment as they call it in the United States. And people have been shoving little coins into in the window. There's a cracked window, and you see people have been shoving coins in there. It's really interesting little details. Lots of little details like that. And so you've got to ask, is this question over if it is some. I suppose there's several scenes which include that kind of detail, because the viewer is then reminded and thought, well, if this is not real, if this is like some kind of hallucination he's having, it's a very detailed hallucination. Now he's living with Jacob is a postman, and he's living with a young woman called Jezebel. She's an attractive, dark-haired young woman, and we don't know. I think they may be married, or if his wife or his girlfriend, we don't know. But they're living in the same place together. He has a previous partner, though, a previous wife, an ex-wife, and he had 3 kids with her, and there were two kids, and their names were Gabe. I don't know if that's short for Gabriel, but he's always referred to as Gabe. Never Gabriel, G-A-B-E. It's actually Macaulay Culkin. It's actually a very young Macaulay Culkin. He's only about 4 years old in this film, and he's uncredited. I don't know why he was not credited, but I think this may be in his first movie. He's 4, maybe 5 years old. I don't know. Now, of course, he's a rather strange chap, rather skinny, wizened guy, old before his time. But his brothers, Gabe's brothers, are called Jed and Eli, and again, biblical names. And he actually says at one point, because his wife asks him, his new wife asks him, what, your kid came round today and delivered something for you. What do their names mean? He said, oh, they're prophets. And of course they're prophets of the Old Testament. And there's these photos, and one of the photos is of Gabe. And Jacob starts crying when he sees him, and of course. And she says, "Oh, is that the dead one?" And it's like the one. She's quite heartless. She's quite tactless. This woman, actually, she's not someone. She's not someone I could ever live with. I don't think. She's nice looking, but she's a bit of a bitch. She's, "Oh, is that the one who died?" And she sometimes says sort of tactless things like that, And he's crying because he sees his boy, even though it's like a few years since this boy died. This is about 5 years later or so. And then it's funny because she says she takes the photos and burns them in this. They've got like this communal incinerator, and she puts it in this little slot, and you see the photos going down into a fire. And you know what? That is the memory hole, isn't it, from 1984? It's the memory hole. Now, you learn a bit of Jacob's background in the next scene. As I said, there's always going to be spoilers in this, I'm afraid. He goes to see his chiropractor. He's got a bad back, and he goes to see his chiropractor, and his chiropractor's Danny Aiello is the actor, and who's the sort of somewhat older man wearing a white jacket and things like that. And you learn a bit of Jacob's background. You learn that he's a very educated man. In fact, in the first scene where he's with his fellow soldiers, they keep calling him Professor. That's his kind of nickname. And he's an educated man. He's got a PhD. He became a postman after the war, and he says, I didn't want to think much after Vietnam. And then you see the chiropractor Louis just standing looking at him, like smiling benevolently, and Jacob says, you know, you look like an angel, Louis, you know that? Louis is the only character in the film who does not have a biblical name. Louis. Things get a bit weird because, like, a car tries to run him over. He's just walking along like this little alleyway, and this car comes along, and it's a wide alleyway, and this guy shouts, isn't it? This guy, you don't know his name at the time, his name's Michael, but he appears in many scenes, and Jacob sees him without actually talking to him. He shouts, watch out! And this car's driving along towards him and tries to run him over. And what's more, the people in the car don't look quite normal. I mean, I've missed a bit, actually. I've missed a bit. When he's on the station in the underground, because I forgot about this. So my notes aren't that good. I should remember it. It's a film I'm very familiar with. You go back to the scene on the second scene, the one on the underground, when he gets off the station after being on this train with these horrible people. He suddenly sees that the station's locked up and he can't get off the station. And then he sees that there is an exit on the opposite platform, but there's no way to get across because there's no connecting tunnel or something. So he decides to risk crossing the track, and it's like a muddy, dirty underground tunnel with rats, puddles. He's careful not to step on the third rail, things like that. And he gets to the other side. No, he doesn't get to the other. He doesn't get to the other side. But he sees no trains coming. He's halfway across, and suddenly this underground train appears, coming towards him really fast. It's like with a spooky noise and everything, and it misses him. Only just misses him. He jumps out of the way. But the passengers inside are all sort of lined up by the window, looking out, really crazy like. And one of them sort of waves at the back on the back window. One of them sort of waves at him a bit like that. And when this car tries to run him over, some of the people in the car, there's 4 guys in the car, and at least 2 of them at the back, they are like these creatures. So yeah, it's really really weird. He goes to the receptionist. This is where it gets very sort of Hitchcockian. You know, it's another Ian. I'm sure this draws on many famous horror kind of tropes. And Alfred Hitchcock, you know, used to like films about people who had memories of things which later appeared to be not real, and they thought they might be going crazy. But I remember this. Yeah, there's a film called The Lady Vanishes, in which some people on train meet an old lady, and it turns out later, then she just sort of disappears, and they think, oh, well, we met that lady, and they say, oh, she doesn't exist. And Jacob has this kind of experience. He goes to see his doctor because he's also seeing a psychologist as well, and the medical receptionist is very, very well cast and very well acted. She's this perfect old bag. You know, the medical receptionists have a bad rap, and this is like almost like a caricature of one. And he goes very, very, very officious, bad-tempered, snappy, bureaucratic, and informs him that it appears he doesn't exist. They don't have any record of him. And he goes, that's crazy. No, there's no record of you. What about my psychiatrist? Oh, there's no psychiatrist of this name here. And so it's almost like he's sort of like vanished. He's been sort of unpersoned. And what's weird is, at one point you see she's wearing this bonnet, this like paper bonnet which nurses used to wear, and it falls off. She's got horns coming out of her head, little tiny horns. That's scary, isn't it? And he find out that his psychiatrist has died. The psychologist or psychiatrist has died. He's literally been killed. His car blew up. And then he goes back to his partner. He goes back home to his wife, and he's troubled, and it's weird because, like, at this point he keeps saying, he says, I don't know what's going on with me, these people following me around, I think I'm going crazy, they're not human, they're like demons. He starts reading books on demonology as well, and she's sort of like talking to him, and you can see her because she's behind him. They're both sort of sitting on a bed naked. It's not a porn movie or anything, but, you know, they're both sort of naked, and she's behind him, like, and he's sort of like sitting on the edge of the bed looking forward. The camera you can see both of them. He can't see her face and her facial expression, and she's got a strange look on her face, almost as if she knows. That's strange. She says, "What are they like, What are they like, Jacob?" And he's like, her face. She has this weird expression on her face. I don't know if that's intentional, but it's almost like she sort of knows what it's about. You know what I mean? And it's the viewer. I'm left thinking, you know, it's almost like she knows what it's about, but she doesn't. She's not faking expression because his back's turned to her. Then they go to a party at someone's house. It's obviously one of their friends, and things are a bit normal. They're sitting around listening to the music of the time. This is set in the mid-1970s, and they listen to a James Brown number. You know, I don't know which one. But I always remember because it's a scary scene. Things at first seem a bit weird, not obsessive, but there's like a sheep's head in the fridge, like a skinned sheep's head in the fridge. They've got a bird cage, and inside it is like a crow, not a budgie or a canary, a crow. It's all a bit weird. And Jacob's going around, and there's these flirty women everywhere. I mean, it's like almost I don't know if that's, you know, his girlfriend's there, but these women's flirting with him, and then he meets her. It's when he goes up these stairs. It's almost like an ascension, you know. And halfway up the stairs, there's this psychic lady sitting there who looks. She's a black woman, but has like a turban on, like she's slightly hippie-like. And she's very flirty with him as well. She's sort of very coming on. She's giving him a come-on kind of act as well. And she says, she wants to read his palm. She wants to read the lines on his palm. And she said, according to this, you're already dead. Your lifeline is cut off there, which means you're already dead. And she laughs, and they have a joke about it, but it's a weird thing, isn't it? And then suddenly things start going weird at the party. The crow starts flying around, and then these creatures. Jacob sees like a man he used to know as a soldier, and this guy's head is thrashing from side to side. It's a particular kind of special effect. It was done by shooting you shoot them at a very slow frame rate where they're doing that with their head. But when you play it at normal speed, it sounds like they're thrashing their head from side to side in a way you couldn't actually do that in real life at that speed. They're thrashing their head violently from side to side, shaking their heads. And he sees that, and then these tentacled creatures start appearing, and his girlfriend and wife is like dancing, and this tentacle creature starts kind of dancing with her, and and she's sort of like, she's moaning in a very erotic kind of way, and then Jacob passes out, and then he gets ill after that, and they put him in a. I don't know if this is actually normal. I know this was done several times. If someone has a very high fever, you put them in a bath of ice. I don't know if that's actually the right thing to do if someone does have a very high temperature. Just dump him in a bath. But they shove him in a bath. I mean, and they cold water, and they pour ice on top of him. Literally, they pour ice on top of him. He's like, you're killing me! Shout, and then it gets really weird, because then he wakes up and it's like he's gone back in time. He wakes up and he's in his old house with his old wife, his first wife, and his kids are in the next room, and Gabe is there. It's before, when Gabe was still alive, because of course you find out that Gabe of course has died. I mean, that's revealed in the scene when he first sees the photo, because he's crying because his son's died. His son was killed in an accident riding his bike. And all the kids are there, Jed, Gabe and Eli, and his wife Sarah, and he's lying in the bed, and he said, "Oh my God, it's cold in here." And she's left the window open. And he said, "Oh, I was dreaming I was in a bath of ice, and that's why." And then they have a little bit of pillow talk, and he talks about, my goodness, what a dream. I was living with this woman Jezebel. And it's someone he knows. It's actually someone he works with. It's a colleague, a post lady. And indeed, they do work together in the other reality. And so now the viewer's left with this possibility that his life the life he's living with Jezebel in this little flat, was separated from his wife, is not real. It's just a dream, and he's just woken up from the dream. And he says to her, "I was living with this woman." They laugh about it, you know, and things like that. They both have a chuckle about it, and he talks to his kids, and you think, my goodness me. So we've now got like two levels of reality. He woke up from a dream on the underground, on the New York subway, and now he's woken up from that reality into another reality, and you think, well, blimey. I mean, this has happened. False awakenings have happened before. I mean, I've had those in dreams. I've had a dream, and I think I've woken up from the dream, and I haven't really. I'm still dreaming. This can be used very effectively in horror. I mean, in American Werewolf in London, there's a very good dream sequence where the character is having a nightmare. He appears to wake from the nightmare, but then the nightmare carries on. And he realises it's a false awakening. And now that's happened to me. Not in scary nightmares, but in dreams. That's happened to me, where I've woke up and I'm not really woke up. I just think I have. And now, by this time, when I first saw the film, I was thinking, hang on, what's real and what's not? And of course, that immediately conjures up the question about, how do you know what's real at any point? It's just like he's just woken up, and he's not surprised. For him, he immediately concludes that he's simply woken up from a dream. He doesn't think, oh my God, I'm having a hallucination of being with my ex-wife. He immediately judges this reality of when he wakes up in this bed with his ex-wife, his first wife, as more real than what he's just left behind, living with Jezzy in this other apartment and being in an ice bath because he's got a fever. And interspersed with this are flashbacks from Vietnam. He sees himself. What happened is, after the battle, he runs up. There's a lot of confusion during the battle, and the soldiers get separated. The unit is basically broken up, and he's wandering through the Vietnam jungle, lost. And someone comes up. An unseen assailant, runs at him with a rifle with a bayonet fixed and stabs him. And he's rescued by these medics, and they do some field surgery on him, and then he has to be airlifted to an air ambulance. And then you see him. It's interspersed with him being carried on a stretcher and elevated to an air ambulance, which is hovering, unable to land. They have to use a hoist to get him into the air ambulance. And this is all interspersed with these scenes. So he's having flashbacks, and you think, well, hang on, these are flashbacks. But then, at best point, I was questioning what is real. I mean, maybe we can apply this to our own life. How do we know when something is real? We generally judge it on how real it feels. That's the thing, we judge it on how real it feels. Like, I have a dream and it doesn't feel very real. I wake up from that dream and I'm awake, like I am now. I believe right now I'm awake. I can't prove I'm awake right now. I can't prove I'm not dreaming about making this video. I've had dreams, very lucid, very lucid and very realistic and very vivid dreams about making videos like this. It's a big subject, but I've had dreams where, and the pinching yourself doesn't work. And I've tried it. When you pinch yourself, and if it doesn't hurt, it means you're dreaming. I've tried that. I pinched myself, and it did hurt, and I was dreaming. Yeah, dreams. Dreams can be as realistic as real life. And when you are dreaming, your brain is very active because it's essentially acting as a virtual reality generator. And it's a kind of like, you get some hints when he's in this weird second reality. You get some hints that things aren't quite right. For example, Gabe says when he tucks Gabe into bed because Gabe can't sleep, and he's going to go back to his bedroom, And then Gabe says, "Don't go, Dad, don't go." He says, "I gotta go to bed, Gabe." And he says, "I'll leave the door open then," things like that. And he goes down, he sits on the bed, and you suddenly realise it's almost like he's coming, he already feels himself being, the realisation that he's been dragged out of this reality. He sits on the bed next to his wife, and she's like, and he suddenly starts to look very frightened. And then that moment, the next shot is him lying in the ice bath, looking terrified and upset. I'm very, very wondering if he's going crazy. And he's lying in the bath, and there's lots of concerned people looking around him. His wife's there, the dog is looking, his family dog is looking at him, looking very worried. The doctor's there. I say, "You're a lucky man, Jake. I think you're all right now." And interspersed with this is more scenes of him in the with the medics in Vietnam. And he actually asks, I mean, he's lying in bed, and she says, "Oh, you were raving in that bath. You were talking to your ex-wife. You were talking to your kids, even the dead one." And he's very tactless. This woman, not someone I could ever get on with. And so Jacob then is reading books on demonology, and this is where it gets really scary, because Jezebel is very annoyed with him because he's hanging around the house, and he's like ignoring her because reading, and she goes up to him, "Anybody in there?" She gets, "Anyone in there? Anyone home?" And suddenly her face turns into a demonic face. That's scary. He starts back in horror, and then next moment she's back to normal, and she's wondering, what the hell's up with you? That's scary, isn't it? That's she turns in, and it's like black eyes, like the black-eyed kid. So her eyes go completely black, and she has these weird teeth. Apart from that, she's sort of like normal. That's scary, yeah. And then he gets a phone call from a guy called Paul, he was the guy who was catatonic and just sitting there catatonic. And he goes and meets with this guy, and then Paul repeats, she says, "Jake, I'm going to hell." And he repeats basically the same thing, that he's been having exactly the same serious experience that Jacob had. And then you see this guy Michael in the background, you know. And then Paul's car gets blown up, and you see this guy Paul. He's played by Pruitt Taylor Vince, who's actually this is an actor who he was in this other film I saw called Heavy, which is like a really depressing film. But he's a good actor. I mean, he's very, very quiet in that film. He hardly says a word, but he has facial expressions which are full of pain, and it's an extremely melancholy film. It's got Debbie Harry in as well, from Blondie. It's a quite low budget amateur independent film, but it's bloody depressing. I just thought of that because I remember seeing him in this other film called Heavy. A film I probably wouldn't watch again because it's really, really grim. And he meets his other army buddies at this funeral, Paul's funeral, and then it turns out all of them except one are also having these experiences. And they start questioning, is this, if we're all having these experiences, is it because the government did something to us in Vietnam? And so they go and see a solicitor, and they say, "Look, I need you to investigate. I need you to investigate." But then the other soldiers pull out. His mates all pull out. And this is an interesting part of the film, because it's the only part of the film. What happens is Jacob phones them up, and he phones up them and says, "Look, we need to just to talk about the case, because they're going to try and investigate, maybe sue for compensation if they've been messed with." And the guy on the other end says, "Oh no, look, war is war. Just let it go, Jacob. Let it go." We can't. He said, "No, Jacob, please, just let it go." And he's insistent. Eventually, he puts the phone down on Jacob, and then the guy turns. This is on the other end. You see this man on the other end of the phone. And he turns around and looks at all the others, and there's the other soldiers all sitting there. And that's interesting, because that is a scene. That is a scene within the film in which Jacob is not there. He's not present. All the other scenes have Jacob present, indicating that this could be some kind of hallucination on Jacob's part. Now, if there's a scene in the film which does not have Jacob present, it indicates it has some kind of objective reality. The viewer is told essentially this particular reality is the real one, because here we see there's a scene here where Jacob's not present. Once the phone's put down, essentially Jacob is no longer, Jacob becomes an unseen character within that particular scene. So at that time I thought, does that mean that, does that actually mean that Jacob is, that's Jacob's reality, and everything else, the Vietnam flashbacks, and this scene where he's with his wife and kids, his first wife and kids, that's going back a few years. I mean, they make him look younger in that. They give him slightly darker hair, which is clever. The attention to detail in this film. That's also not real. And what he's in now, this life he's living now, a few years after Vietnam, he's split up with Sarah and he's with this new woman. That's real. Yeah, but now when he goes to see the solicitor refuses to speak to him at first, and then angrily condemns him and says, you made all this up, and it's pretty obvious, like, and then he tells a full story. He says, all you guys are just, you're lying about the whole thing. It's all stolen valor. You never went to Vietnam. And Jacob, of course, says, yes, we did. We were there in Vietnam. And this guy gets really angry. And it's pretty obvious that at this point he's essentially been threatened. And that the other soldiers have also been threatened. And then the solicitor's been threatened. Someone's put the heavies on these guys to shut them up. And then Jacob gets kidnapped. A car pulls up, and these thugs, I think it's the same car that was chasing him, but there are no monsters in the car this time. They're just humans, no beasts, no demons, just humans. But they threaten him. They say, keep your mouth shut about this. Let bygones be bygones, Mr. Singer. We don't want to have you. I hope we've made our point. Basically threatening him to keep quiet. So at this point, I was just thinking, at this point, there's nothing to indicate that what's happening is in any way not real, and that all the symptoms he's experiencing, these encounters with demons, at this point, I was thinking while watching this film that it's caused by something that was done to him. I mean, some kind of drug they gave them when they were soldiers, and it's had a long-term effects, and they keep getting these hallucinations as a result of a long-term brain damage caused by this drug. It gets a bit. He eventually escapes from the car. He bashes the guys he kicks and punches the guys who've kidnapped him, and jumps out the car. And he's lying on the road. He's hurt his back because he's got a bad back, and of course he's in an awful lot of pain. And this guy dressed as Santa Claus comes up and steals his wallet. I think this is sort of set in the kind of pre-Christmas time, early December. I mean, there's a reference to a few weeks ago, someone in a previous scene talking about the psychiatrist who got killed when his car blew up, says, he says, it was just after Thanksgiving a few weeks ago. Well, Thanksgiving is November, isn't it? I can't remember what date in November, because in Britain we don't do Thanksgiving, but and then there is he's taken to hospital by ambulance, and then what follows is I think this is the most frightening part of the film. He's first taken to a normal treatment room with some doctors, and then they say, well, we better get him into X-ray. And so they then two porters actually. The next scene you just see him being taken down a corridor by what looks like two porters. It's Pride and Dignity. And they're taking him down what looks like through a derelict building. It looks like an old derelict hospital. And there's no one. Their surroundings are completely empty. I used to joke about this because I had to, when I was portering, I had to go to the West Wing with a patient, and we had to divert down the service tunnel because the main street was shut. The main thoroughfare to the West Wing was shut. We had to divert down a surface tunnel, and I joked with the nurse and the patient, "Oh, this is like Jacob's Ladder, isn't it?" And they laughed. It's in the film. But this is and as they go through this derelict building. But then Jacob looks into a room, and in this room there's a crushed bicycle, and it's his son's. It's Gabe's bike. This is the bike. as I said, he had an accident. Gabe was killed a few years before this film starts. He's killed in an accident. His bike is hit by a lorry, and you see this crushed bike, and it's Gabe's. It's like a chopper, you know, as pre-BMX type kids' bikes. And Jacob says, "Gabe," and they carry on through this derelict building, and eventually it starts. They leave the derelict bit, and they enter what looks like a psychiatric ward. It gets increasingly creepy and horrible. They enter what looks like a psychiatric ward with people banging their heads against the window and moaning and gibbering, things like that. And then they enter another place where there's blood on the floor, and also what looks like pieces of meat, pieces of raw meat and blood lying on the floor, all parts of bodies, you know, organs, human organs maybe. Obviously not real. No, obviously he must have used like animal organs from a butcher's, but you see these pieces of meat on the floor and blood everywhere. And these two porters keep dragging him on this trolley. He's secured to the trolley with straps. He can't get off. He's shackled. And there's this like the ceiling is like open. It's like a grating, and above is the creep. There's people. There's like a man dressed sort of rolling around. He looks like a baby. He's got a nappy on. There's a woman trying to breastfeed a baby doll, and there's this guy with no legs. And they're all like they're all shouting and mumbling and things like that. And then eventually they take him into a second treatment room. Oh, and he sees lots of people with heads shaking and things like that. And they take him into a second treatment room. And there's doctors. There's a whole what looks like doctors surrounding him. And he's shackled. They put more straps over his body so he can't escape. And they put his head in a halo. You know that you may have seen them, massive metal frame that secures the head in with little attachments that keeps your head in a single position. They put his head in a halo, and then Jacob says, "I want to go home," and the doctor says, "This is home. You're dead. You've died. This is your home. There's nowhere else to go." And he says, "I'm not dead. I'm alive." He says, "What are you doing here then?" And you realise that one of the doctors is Jezebel. And another is this monster with no eyes. And the monster, this eyeless beast, it's like a flap of skin across the top of his face, plunges a hypodermic syringe into his forehead, and he screams. The next scene, he's actually in a ward in the hospital, a normal hospital, and his ex-wife visits him, and he says, "Oh, I'm alive, I'm alive," and you hear a voice saying, "Dream on." But then he's rescued by Louis, the chiropractor. Now, I'm sure this guy was a hospital porter before he became a chiropractor. He bursts in and says, "What are you doing, you barbarians? This is the Middle Ages." They've basically got Jacob in traction. He's like a... Now, of course, spinal injury is a horrible thing. It's very, very painful. It can be extremely painful and extremely debilitating. Hugo Rune, of course, will know this, and anyone else who's had a severe spinal injury will know this. Sometimes these effects can be permanent, you never get over them. And Jacob's basically lying there, he's in traction, he's got his legs up, and they're basically stretching. It's a way of stretching the spine to try and you have to stay in one position for a very long time, sometimes for weeks, and it's all, as a way of trying to heal the spine. And but then Louis says these nurses come up, and Louis gets violent. He grabs an aluminium crutch, and he says, "I'll wrap this around you if you come near me. I'm going to take my friend Louis. He's my patient. You're barbarians." I can't remember his exact words. Then he gets a wheelchair, and the way he handles the wheelchair, you know, this guy was a porter. He had to have been a hospital porter at some point, and because he's a heroic figure, I like to think of him as a hospital porter, I suppose, just because I'm biased, of course. And then he gets Louis into the wheelchair, and then he crashes he pushes through the double swinging doors. "Mind your toes, Jacob." And he goes, boom. Now that's a porter. That's a porter, all right. And then he takes Louis takes Jacob to his surgery and starts giving him chiropractic, and Jacob starts to feel better. He starts to feel happy. And then Louis says something very interesting, because you know at the beginning you see in the last scene of Louis, Jacob says, "Oh, you look like an angel," and this is very interesting. And then and Louis says, "Did you ever read Meister Eckhart?" Meister Eckhart's very interesting. He's a 14th century mystic, a Christian mystic who was accused of heresy by the church. He wasn't burned at the stake, but he came pretty close at one point. And he said that Jacob says, I feel like I'm in hell. And Louis says, Meister Eckhart saw hell too. And he said, the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of life, your memories, your attachments. They burn them all away, but they're not punishing you. They're freeing your soul. So if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth. So Eckhart is essentially saying that you have these perceptions, you have these perceptions of beasts or beings around you, essentially because you're near the end of your life. And how you perceive them, whether they're good or bad, whether they're horrible monsters, is down to you. It's because it's your own mental state as you approach your demise. Depends on what kind of creatures they are, whether they're good or bad, whether they're demons or angels. And that immediately gives us a big clue about what's actually going on. Because after the previous scene in the hospital, the doctor told him, you're dead. You've got nowhere to go, you're dead. In a few scenes earlier at the house party, the psychic lady who's reading his palm says, this lifeline here is cut off, that means you're already dead. So that you start to realise maybe Jacob is dead. So if he's dead, what's he experiencing? What's actually happening to him? He goes back to his apartment and he goes through his memory box, his old photos and things like that. There's his discharge papers and things like that, and he keeps seeing little glimpses of his son, and also of his old friends thrashing their heads around, and he starts crying, and he's like, he thinks what the hell's happening to me, you know? And then he gets a call from Michael, this character played by Matt Craven, and he goes and meets up with him, and then so it goes straight from one plot line to the other. You see, this is what I mean. These things don't really cohere, and Michael introduced. He says his name's Michael Newman, and he said he was in the army in Vietnam, and he worked as a chemist. He was basically caught in a drug bust. He wasn't originally drafted, or he didn't originally sign up, but he was caught in a drug bust, and they offered him a deal. You know, they'll drop the charges if he goes and works for the military in Vietnam as part of the war effort. And he goes there and he just devises a drug which he calls the ladder. Because this guy normally makes LSD and things like that, and synthesizes recreational drugs. Then they ask him to make something called the ladder. This is where you get the name Jacob's Ladder. And it is a drug designed to increase aggression, which they want to give to the soldiers because they're losing the war at that point. So they want to give this drug to the soldiers to make them more aggressive, so they'll fight more. Even to the point where they're not concerned for their own survival, they'll just go crazy and start shooting. And he said, we tested it on one unit, yours. And then Jacob says, well, so what's happened then? We had a battle and everyone started going crazy. So you had a battle, but it wasn't with the Viet Cong, the principal enemy. They fought each other and they killed each other. And he just, I wanted to apologise because the ladder was my baby. But he says, now I can cure you. He says, I can't change the past. You're a survivor of this. I can cure you. So I've got an antidote. I developed an antidote for this, for the long-term psychotic effects of this drug, which says basically at that point you've been told that Jacob is experiencing, like I say, long-term psychotic side effects of this drug, and that's why he's seeing these demons. So now you've got two stories about what's going on. You think at first it's Jacob's dead, and it's going to be he's having some kind of experience which related to his impending death, and you don't know what's real or what's not. And so this is then there's the deleted scene, which really should have been left in. It's 30-minute deleted scene where Michael takes him to a hotel room and gives him this antidote. Now, you go into this rather dark, seedy hotel, and it's got a cracked mirror, and Michael looks at him through this cracked mirror, which indicates things are a bit creepy. I actually watched a commentary of this by the director, where he points out he included this cracked mirror because he wanted to give the impression that, you know, things are still a bit creepy with this guy, and something bad's about to happen. So he feeds him in a pipette. There's this bottle, and it's just a tiny little. He says, "You only need a little bit of this. It's very strong." And he puts it on his tongue like that, and he says, "Just relax." He keeps repeating, "Just relax, just lie down on the bed and relax. Lie down on the bed and relax." And suddenly blood starts dripping. There's cracks appear in the ceiling. Blood starts dripping down, and these demons start appearing in the cracks in the ceiling. And Jacob's like lying on the bed. "I can't move it," he says. And then Michael jumps on him and shoves the pipette in his mouth, saying, "Take it, take it!" You know, wanting some more. He has to get a higher dose. And then the next moment he like wakes up and the demons are gone. And Michael says, "I got rid of them for you. I got rid of the demons. I got rid of these horrible hallucinations you've been having. I've cured you from the side effects of the ladder." And Jacob smiles and he feels happy, and then he goes back to he doesn't go back to Jezebel at the apartment. He goes back to his old family home. He lived in quite a posh apartment. I think he was originally living, he's from a kind of middle class background. Then he becomes a postman afterwards to sort of escape all of that, and then because of Vietnam. But he goes back to this rather posh place, and there's a concierge who recognises him and says, "Dr. Singer, how charming to see you again." And he has at this point he has his final flashback of Vietnam, which is, you see the man who stabs him in the jungle, and it's one of his friends. It's one of his friends who actually tries to kill him. And so he goes into his flat where his ex-wife lives, and everything's just as if there's no one there. It's empty, but everything is just laid out as if they've just popped out for a minute. You know, the kids have got their homework books open on the table. There's a half-eaten meal. The TV's on, things like that. The TV's just it's not showing a picture. It's just snowstorm. It's just out. It's tuned out, and then he sort of like sits around looking at photos for a while, reminiscing. And he's got a peaceful look on his face now. He looks happier. Then he sits down and sort of like dozes for a bit, and you see another bit of detail. The taxi driver who takes him to his first home is called A. Gatero, and you see his name. You see, like, he's got a crucifix as well. There's a lot of biblical and religious symbolism in this film. You don't know exactly why. I don't know why the filmmaker decided to tell you the name of the taxi driver. It just says A. Gatero, Gatero. For some reason they put that in there. There's a lot of interestingly, also in the scene where Michael cures him, when Jacob wakes up and he's cured, Michael has that kind of, he also has this angelic look, but there's like a light coming in from behind him, and it's like he has this sort of angelic look as well. And then Jacob he wakes from his doze, and things are there was like a thunderstorm and dark clouds outside. You hear thunder rolling outside the flat, Sarah's flat, his old family home. And he wakes up and there's bright light shining in the window, and it's fluorescing slightly, it's shimmering a little bit, like it's not natural light. And then he looks across, he hears a noise, he hears the sound of like a kid's toy, a music box. He looks over and he sees Gabe, his son, the son who died. And there's a tender scene then where he comforts his father and says, "It's okay, Dad," and then, "Come on, it's time to go up." And of course Jacob then ascends the stairs, It's like the stairs. It's like the scene where he ascends the stairs to see the psychic lady. It's the psychic lady at the party sitting halfway up the stairs, which is an odd place for someone to sit. But he ascends these stairs, and he has one little look back, and there's a bright light from above, from the upstairs, and then he turns around and just keeps walking with Gabe, and that's the end. And then there's and of course, if you take away the outtake, it doesn't make any sense. But then you have this. This slide is put up saying it was reported that the hallucinogenic drug BZ was used in experiments on soldiers during the Vietnam War. The Pentagon denied this story. So that's kind of put up as a kind of makeshift explanation, seeing as they left that deleted scene out, which is a great shame. Fascinating film. I'm Fred. What's his name? The guy who was in What the Bleep? Fred. The guy who wrote The Spiritual Universe. He mentions this film. And he says, like, because what happens, I should point out, I left out the most important bit. After Jacob does ascend the staircase into the light with Gabe, going up to the light, you know, towards the light kind of thing. It's all very symbolic of the afterlife, the ascent into heaven. There's one final scene in Vietnam. Jacob's in the field hospital being treated by doctors. And they've got their stethoscope out, they're listening for his heartbeat, and they say, I'm afraid this one's gone. He's dead. And then they take one of his dog tags off, and they say, what's his name? Jacob Singer. He looks kind of peaceful. He put up quite a fight, but he looks kind of peaceful. And then suddenly you realise, you realise the truth. The reality, the real world, was always Vietnam. And that Jacob actually never made it out of Vietnam. He died, he was killed in the war. And everything he's experienced since the war was essentially a kind of a prolonged near-death experience. And you know, I've talked about near-death experiences a lot on this channel, and I'm very interested in them. And this was what he experienced, was actually a kind of near-death experience. From his point of view, from his subjective point of view, seemed to last for years. But what he was experiencing in Vietnam was the reality, was the real world. It's a really profound concept, which, you know, as I said about Bruce Joel Rubin, about how he went and stayed in a monastery and things like that, and he must have become interested in these spiritual things. So to give him a full timeline of his life, to dissect it, and indeed, even if you don't see the deleted scenes, you can realise this. The only problem with leaving the deleted scene out is that you don't. The two main plot lines, the one about the secret government experiments and the one about Jacob possibly being dead and things, these don't really cohere, except you might conclude that Jacob, until the very last shot, the last scene where in the hospital, in the field hospital, you can conclude that everything Jacob experienced, you know, having these various scenes in a lot of the drama takes place in hospitals in this particular film. A lot of the scenes where he was in the underworld and things like that, they were all part of the hallucination where the doctor says you're dead and things like that, and you could conclude that they were, and the horrible thing at the party and his wife's face turning into a black-eyed thing, that's all part of the hallucinations. But at the end, of course, you do realise what actually happened. So to give you a full timeline, Jacob is married to Sarah. He had 3 boys, Jed, Eli and Gabe. Jacob is like he's a professor, he's an educated man with a PhD, he's Dr. Singer. Then at some point before the war, at some point before the Vietnam War, Gabe is killed in an accident. He's riding his bike and is run over by a lorry. You see the bike basically being crushed under the wheels of a lorry, and you assume Gabe is there with him. Then Jacob is sent. You find out he serves for 2 years in the war. So he spends 2 years fighting in Vietnam. Whether he was drafted or whether he volunteered, I don't know. It's never revealed exactly why he fought in Vietnam. obviously, like he's not like a teenager. Like most of the soldiers in Vietnam were teenagers. You know that song by Paul Hardcastle. You know their average age was 19. He's obviously a little bit older, but for some reason he ends up fighting in Vietnam. He's killed, and he has this horrible experience in Vietnam where the soldiers are becoming catatonic, and the real cause is never revealed. He's attacked and injured by one of his fellow unit mates. He's taken to the field hospital in a helicopter. The helicopter's actually attacked as well, and one of the pilots is killed, I should point out. The air ambulance. He's taken by air ambulance to the field hospital, and then there he dies. But interspersed with this entire process between when he's injured, when he's stabbed, someone stabs him with a bayonet, and when he dies in the field hospital in Vietnam, he undergoes a near-death experience in which he lives a fake life, an imaginary life, which is a kind of a dream life, which is so realistic he thinks it's real, in which he survives the war, goes back to the United States, to New York, gets a job as a postman, and meets this other woman. Apparently he knew this woman beforehand and was attracted to her beforehand when he was married to Sarah. Meets her, either moves in with her, marries her, or just lives with her. And that entire life is not. I mean, it lasts for a number of years, because we're dealing from 1971, from October 1971 to basically the mid-1970s, so it's a few years long, and all that is part of an imagined world, an imagined life, and he keeps seeing himself in Vietnam. He experienced, and you think that's just a flashback, when in fact what's happening in Vietnam is real, and the life he's living post-Vietnam is not real. It's essentially a holographic, hallucinogenic dream. And the fact that it lasts so many years is, people who have near-death experiences often report that they, however vivid and lucid they are, they appear to be timeless. People find it hard to judge exactly how long they lasted in terms of notional time. This just seems to be one with a very protracted length of notional time. And finally, at the end, when he's assisted by these people in his life, in this fake life, are obviously not real. So some of them are real people he knew from Vietnam, like his fellow soldiers. But then there's this relationship he has with this woman who, although she exists, he didn't know her very well. And Louis, of course, the chiropractor, who looks like an angel. He says, "You look like a big cherub," Jacob says. And of course Michael, this other guy, who also is depicted in an angelic way, as if they've been sent into Jacob's fantasy to pull him out of it, to say to Jacob, you need to find peace, and in whichever way they can. As a person, I believe I may well have had an encounter with an angel myself, as you know from a recent film, The Angel of the Outer Limits, that I made. They don't necessarily just walk in and start dictating and telling you, and they give you hints, they help you, they show you the way, which is what was done. And in a sense, Jacob taking this antidote that Michael gave him was symbolic. It was kind of his way of saying, within this residual memory of his life, it's his way of saying, I'm ready to pass on now. I'm ready to pass on to the afterlife. And only when he's done that is the spell broken, and he sees his son there, and his son says, it's time to go up, and he goes up into the light. It's a moving sort of film, I think, in that way. That's the spiritual message of it. And the demons themselves, that's like the quote from Meister Eckhart, the demons are only demons, they only appear as demonic monsters because Jacob doesn't want to die, he doesn't want to leave the world. Maybe he feels he has unfinished business to do, and so at a soul level he thinks it's wrong, which is why he clings on by creating this fake reality, which in notional time appears to last for years, as he survives the war, he goes back to New York, he lives with this woman he used to fancy, but none of it's real. It's a creation of his desire to live. Makes you wonder how real it might be. We'll talk about this in the live stream, which I'll do very soon. Actually, I want to actually perhaps do it before the end of the weekend. I might even put up a notice tomorrow and do it on Sunday evening. But is this possible? What we're here, is that what we're experiencing now? Maybe I want you to leave you with this question. On December the 21st, 2012, did the world actually really end? Because it's only after that we start getting the Mandela effect. It's literally the following year, 2013, that Fiona Broome starts recording the first examples of the Mandela effect. And things such as synchronicities increase. Synchronicity in people's lives. Now, I've noticed this in my life. I've got the Mandela effect. We have synchronicity. So, are we going through a collective near-death experience right now, which is prolonged and detailed and very mundane in its form? As Jacob's was. I mean, Jacob's near-death experience didn't involve him going down a tunnel. He didn't go down a tunnel. Well, he didn't go down a tunnel towards the light. So, well, at the end he goes towards the light, but it begins with simply a very, as I said, a very sort of prosaic and very recognisable residual image of his life. He just is living a life he would expect to live if he'd survived the war. Are we doing the same right now? I do wonder that. So I think that's something we'll talk about in the upcoming live stream. As I said, look out for the notice, because I'll probably put it up tomorrow. I'd like to do the live stream on Sunday if possible. I'm limited in time because I have to prepare for 2 talks next week. I'm speaking at the Dorset Earth Mysteries Group on Thursday, and then the following day, Friday, which is World Disclosure Day, so there won't be anything to do with world disclosure or anything like that, or Roswell's the 75th anniversary of Roswell until the following week, I'm afraid, because I'm away. But I will do something for Roswell 75, definitely. But the live stream is next. We'll talk about that question in the live stream. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this review of Jacob's Ladder, second part of the watch party. I've got ideas for the next watch party as well. Yeah, I thought of a film would be really good to do a watch party about. It is a film I've discussed before on this channel. However, it's one I've never done. I want to do a watch party about it because I really want to get like your take on it, you viewers. I want to get your take on it. But I'll tell you more about that when I put the notice up and in the live stream in a couple of days. In the meantime, thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.